In this video, what I want to do, I want to share with you notes and go over them. These are the notes for applied stochastic analysis that I'm taking this semester. And we have covered so far 2 lectures on January 6th and on January 8th. And I was thinking, like, what if I will just, so first of all, this semester, what I try to do something new, I'm trying to LaTeX type my notes, which is super fun. And so far I have this. And one of the best way to learn something is just to try to explain this material to someone else. So let me try to just go over the notes and give some of my comments, tell what we have learned, and some of my like insights or what I got excited about and which part were confusing for me. And if you know the answer, please write down in the comments, and I will really appreciate that. So the main idea for this class, we're going to learn stochastic processes, and we're going to learn them more from applied perspective. And the idea is that we're not going to dive way too much into measure theory. And what we're going to do, we're going to assume the existence of some objects or going to assume some facts from the measure theory, and then try to understand how to apply the concepts from this class from different fields. And of course, like as this is applied stochastic analysis, it's based on probability. And for the first part of the class, we're going to review probability. And that's basically what we did for the entire first lecture. So the first lecture, we're going to go over the probability, but the second lecture, we have a little bit more of probability. And we finally started like talking about stochastic processes and one concrete stochastic processes, which are Markov chains. So a first fun thing that we did in this class, our professor asked us to try to generate the random sequence, assuming that we're going to flip a coin, an imaginary coin. So we didn't have an actual coin. And she asked us to try to generate what we think is going to be the most random sequence, assuming that we're going to do 20 flips. And why we did this, I'm going to explain in the next lecture a little bit later. But then the class started, we spent a couple of minutes trying to generate those sequences. And then we jumped into the idea of this class, what we're actually going to do. And here, more or less, that a lot of things in our world, they evolve pretty randomly. For example, a protein in the water bombarded by water molecules, which gives us the random motion. Or like the Earth temperature, which is measured by hockey stick graph, is also like behaves randomly. And of course, the most useful and applicable example, I have heard a lot of people after this class or taking this class because they want to go into finance or like play on stock markets. And stock market price fluctuations are also random. So there's a lot of randomness in our life, and this class is somehow trying to conquer that randomness and study it. So the first part is a review. What we're going to do, first we need to remind ourselves what is a probability space. A probability space consists of triple of the sample space. F is a sigma field of subsets of our sample space, and a probability measure. A sample space, you can think about as the space of all possible outcomes. So for example, if we tossing a coin, then if we're going to toss the coin n times, then our sample space is going to be the sequence of heads and tails. For example, if I'm going to toss my coin n 3 times, then the sequence A, heads, tail, heads, is going to belong to my head space, my sample space. And my sample space contains of all the sequences of length 3, which with heads and tails. Then the second one is the idea we have the sigma field of subsets. And here, as I understand more or less, that we don't have problem to define sigma fields or when it has a sample space, which is finite or countable. But the problem starting to arise when our sample space, for example, is going to be all real line. And in this case, one of the more what people want to do, they, for example, wants to take F as to be all subsets of R. But apparently there is some problem with that this is too big. So that's why we're going to take and consider only the good ones, which are called like Borel sets, which are going to be more than enough to do our probability, but it's not going to be too much that something is going to break. And something is going to break, I don't exactly remember, but it's something along the lines that you want your measure be, please correct me if I'm wrong, if you compute some measure on the interval of AB, and you're going to shift this interval by variable C. So you're going to have A plus C and B plus C. Then you want to measure to be, or whatever we're computing on this interval and this interval be the same. But when we take out F too big, this is not going to hold. So that's why we take our Borel sets, which will allow us to have this property, as I understand. Again, like this is not my field of study. Don't judge too much because I do more like algebra and geometry. And probability is not my strong suit, but I'm trying to learn it. Okay, so and next is probability measure. And probability measure is actually how we're going to measure the probability of our events. And we require a couple of properties. The probability of the empty set, the event didn't happen, is 0. and probability of the entire space is equal to 1. And this one, if we have probability of two disjoint event, then the sum of the probabilities, let's say, of A1 and A2 is equal to the total sum of their probabilities. Okay, so here more or less we defined our probability space. Again, like it's a triple of those three objects. Let's do some examples. So for a toss coin n times, we have that our sample space is going to be the sequences as we discussed before. Our F is going to be collection of all subsets. So in this case, since our sample space is finite, we can take F to be the entire space. And you can check the probability measure, which computes the probability to compute the probability of the event A. Then it's exactly as given by the size of event A corresponding to the entire sample space sigma. Because observe the size of space sigma is exactly 2 to the power of n. And one of the things that I have not mentioned, A is called the event, where A is going to be just a subset of the sample space. Our second example that we're going to spin, imagine like you have a compass and you have the north direction and you randomly are going to spin, and let's say you're like out there in the vacuum and you don't have magnetic fields, and you want to measure the angle that the arrow makes with the north direction. So let's say like this is your arrow dashed, and you want to measure this angle alpha. Then your event space is going to be a continuum. It's exactly going to be the angle between 0 and 2 pi. The F in this case is going to be all Borel sets restricted to 0, 2. So here's the idea. You take the Borel sets on a real line R, and you just restrict them to be between 0 and 2 pi. And your probability measure is going to be the size of the interval A. So for example, you have your angles and you want to figure out when your arrow is going to stop in these two dashed regions. So that's why it will correspond to some angle here, and let's say angle here and angle here. And then this probability event is going to be measured by the length of all of these intervals over here, which exactly is told over here. Okay, so finally we're done with defining what is a probability space and provide a couple of examples. And after this, we're jumping into reviewing a random variable. We say that we have a random variable from for our sample space into S, a subset of R, which is an F measurable function. And the set of all possible values S is called the state space. And here, F measurable means that if we're going to take any Borel set B in R, then we want the inverse of this set to belong to our F. So in other words, any good set that we have in R is also going to be a good set in our sample space. So one of the remarks that we also mentioned that a random variable induces probability measure on R. So that means that whenever we have a random variable, using this random variable, we can define a probability measure on a real line. And we're defining it in the following way. We're going to say that we have probability measure of some set B if we're going to take the pre-image of this set B and compute the probability that we already have in our sample space over here. Let's do a couple of examples to clarify the previous definition and the remark. So the first thing is coin tossing again. And our random variable can be, we're just going to count the number of heads in our sequence. So let's say we're going to toss our coin n times. Then our state space is going to be a discrete set between 0 and n. So that's why the all possible number of heads that we can have is between 0 and n. And this actually can check is going to induce a binomial distribution on S. Another thing is we're going to have our sequence of tosses, and we're going to measure until look only the first toss. If we're going to have head, we're going to assign 1, and we're going to have tails, we're going to assign 0. So that's why our state space contains only two possible outcomes. For the given sequence that we have of our heads and tails, we're going to assign only and check only the first one over here. And this exactly is going to define the following probability measure, that P of 0 is going to be equal to 1/2 because it's only half of outcomes can be with heads. And probability of one of that we're going to get tails is also going to be 1/2. And finally, for our rotation of the spin and the arrow and the north for our compass, we're going to define our random variable that as a square of the angle. Then our state space is going to be the interval between 0 and 4 pi. And something that I didn't check myself, but I think it's a good exercise to show that the induced probability measure in this case is going to be is going to induce a density function of 1/4 pi square root of y. So one of the big ideas so far that we need to understand that we have a probability space and we define a random variable. Having this in mind, we're going to jump a couple of more definitions, standard definitions from probability theory. So we say that we have the cumulative distribution function CDF of a random variable x. If we have this function, which is going to measure our probabilities up to the variable x. So in other words, we have a function from real numbers to the interval 0, 1, with the properties that when f of x goes to negative infinity, it goes to 0. So when x goes to negative infinity, f of x goes to 0. And when x goes to infinity, f of x goes to 1. So more or less, our function is going to look something like this. And our function is also monotonically increasing, and it's right continuous. Why right continuous? Because we're going to also consider the function of this form when we're going to allow the jumps that looks like this. Usually we work with derivative of cumulative distribution function. So that's why we're going to say that a random variable x is discrete if our state space is finite. And a random variable is continuous if the state space is interval or the union of intervals. Yeah, so the idea here that what do we have? So we have our random variable, which maps from the state space into real lines. And then we have our cumulative distribution function from real line to 0, 1, f. And what is happening here, so our random variable has some outcomes that belongs to the, or some outputs that belongs to the real line. And then f is going to kind of go and traverse the real line into this direction. And since like this random variable defines our probability measure on R, and we know that the probability of the entire state space should be equal to 1, and that this cumulative distribution function, as I understand, is kind of trying to measure how our probabilities are going to change if we're going to traverse our state space from, let's say, from the left to the right, because you can imagine that you have like this dots, whatever, or the intervals is our state space, and then cumulative function just recording how fast our probability, or what is like the dynamic of our probabilities and how they change. The next thing what we do, we say that if our random variable is discrete, then by probability mass function, we're going to just define the values of our random variable, probabilities that of our random variable at x. And if x is continuous, then we're going to define that our random variable belongs to the event space A if we just take the integral of our probability mass function of the set of all our events. And here we can observe that the derivative of cumulative distribution function is going to be our probability mass function. The next part that we jump into, we want to figure out how we're now like to define averages. So first thing that we do for the all possible states or like outcomes S, we define the expectation of our random variable. And expectation is more or less is like for each outcome, we have its probability and we multiply our outcome by its probability and sum it up. So for example, the most famous, if we have the die with 6 sides and we have like 1, 2, like 3, then to get each side equals to probability 1/6. So that's why possible all outcomes are going to be between 1 and 6. So to compute the expected value in this case of what of number we're going to roll is equal to the sum of 1 times 1/6 up to 6 times 1/6, and that is equals to 3.5. So we expect on average, if you're going to do a lot of tries, to get like, let's say 3.5. In the case when our random variable is continuous, then instead of taking the sum, we of course is going to take the integral over our state space. And overall, you can check that we can combine both of these definitions into one if we're going to write them in this form. Again, like keeping in mind that this differential f of x here more or less equals to this. And here, again, like we need to use our measure theory to go deep and define all this notion really nicely. And there's like a lot of machinery behind the scenes that we don't cover yet, and which usually we're going to avoid in this class. But the idea is like we want to define this object, these tools, and start applying them to concrete problems. Then the variance of our random variable x, we're going to define the following way. You're going to compute the expected value of our random variable x, so something that we expect to have for a random event or whatever on average that we should get. And then we see how each kind of event on average deviate for our expected value. And we're going to take the square of that. So expected value, so variance of x is going to be equal to the expected value of the square of the difference between the random variable and its expected value. If we're going to use this definition over here, then by expanding this square, we can see that actual variance can be redefined as expected value of x squared minus the expected value squared. That's a nice exercise. Then we define a random vector, which is going to be a vector where each component is a random variable itself. So each of this xi is a random variable. And finally, the big thing here, we define the variance of one random variable, but here we're going to have a random, be a random vector. So each of the components is a random variable. Then we can define expected value of random vector as expected value of each component. And we can define the covariance matrix, which is going to be generalization of the variance over here, as the matrix of this form. When we're going to take the x, and remember, an expected value of x is going to be a vector, and this is going to be a vector. So every component or Cij component of our covariance matrix is going to be exactly the variance that we defined before over here. A really good exercise to show that C is actually positive semi-definite, where positive semi-definite means that for all vectors, the product of X transpose Cx is non-negative. Finally, let's discuss and let's define the stochastic process. So what we have covered so far? So far, we covered the probability space, a random variable, a random vector, expected value, variance, probability density function, cumulative distribution function. The object we need first, we need a probability space for stochastic process, and we need an index set, and which is going to be an ordered set, but index set t is time. And then we're going to say that a stochastic process is a collection of random variables, which we're going to index by our time. So if t, for example, is equals to 1, 2, 3, and etc., then for each of these, we're going to assign the random variable x1 at time, then this is going to be x2, this is going to be x3. So in other words, for each time t, x of t is going to be a random variable on our probability space. And there's two ways to think about these random variables. We can think about them that they are function in terms of two variables, our time and our element in our state space. So whenever we're going to fix one of these variables, you're either going to think about them as a parameterized family of random variables, or we can think about them when we're going to fix the another coordinate as a probability distribution on a path space. This is something that I need to look a little bit closer because I'm still don't completely feel this distinction. So I probably just need to sit down and write down a concrete example. And in this case, for example, we have a probability distribution if we're going to fix our elements in our state space, and we're going to get this simple path. And then we were asked in our class to actually show that C is semi-definite and do some homework problems number 1. Okay, so here I reviewed our first lecture, which was just introduction to probability, some review of probability, and we define our stochastic process, which is going to be a collection of random variables indexed by our time, by our index set, which is going to be an ordered set, where for each choice of our time t, x of t is going to be a random variable on our probability space. Next time, we're going to look into a concrete example of random variables, of stochastic processes, which are Markov processes. Thank you. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.